The abandoned courthouse had stood at the edge of the county square for nearly 40 years, its cracked limestone walls slowly surrendering to vines and weather while newer government buildings rose around it. Locals walked past it every day without giving it a second glance. To them it was nothing more than an aging monument to a forgotten era, a place where old court records had gathered dust and faded into irrelevance. Yet older residents still lowered their voices whenever its name came up, recalling stories of harsh judges, mysterious verdicts, and wealthy families who always seemed to leave the courtroom smiling, no matter what accusations were brought against them. Those tales were dismissed as small-town folklore until the county approved a restoration project to transform the building into a historical museum, celebrating its earliest founders. The restoration crew approached the project like any other. They documented every beam, every window frame, every piece of furniture before deciding what could be repaired and what needed replacing. Most of the courtroom had remained untouched since the building was closed. Long wooden benches sat beneath layers of dust, their surfaces scarred by decades of restless hands. Rusted light fixtures dangled from the ceiling, swaying gently whenever a breeze slipped through broken stained glass windows. At the front of the room, resting on a raised platform, stood the judge's massive walnut desk. Its polished finish had long since faded, replaced by deep scratches and dark stains that hinted at generations of use. Every visible drawer had already been emptied years earlier when the courthouse was abandoned, leaving the desk officially catalogued as historically significant, but completely empty. Late one afternoon, while cleaning the underside of the desk, a restoration carpenter noticed an unusual seam hidden beneath years of hardened varnish. It was so perfectly carved into the wood that it appeared to be part of the desk's original design. Curious, he gently tapped the surrounding panels with the handle of his screwdriver. Every section produced the same solid sound except one. That single panel answered with a faint hollow echo. Thinking it might conceal structural damage, he carefully inserted a thin blade into the seam and applied the slightest pressure. The panel shifted outward by less than an inch before sliding free with surprising ease, revealing a narrow compartment no larger than a shoebox. Inside rested a tightly wrapped bundle sealed in brittle oilcloth. It had been protected so carefully that even after more than a century, the contents remained remarkably intact. The carpenter unfolded the wrapping with trembling hands and discovered a yellowed sheet of parchment covered in carefully drawn landmarks, handwritten measurements, and unfamiliar symbols that did not appear on any modern survey. Along one edge, dark stains had seeped into the paper, while the reverse side carried no names, dates, or official markings that could identify its creator. Near the bottom, written in faded ink with deliberate strokes, was a single sentence that transformed the discovery from a historical curiosity into something far more disturbing. If this is found, they already know you're looking. The discovery was never supposed to become public. The restoration crew had agreed to notify the county archives before discussing the hidden compartment with anyone else. But secrets have a way of escaping long before anyone realizes they are no longer contained. By sunrise the following morning, whispers had already spread through the courthouse staff. A maintenance worker mentioned the hidden map to a friend over breakfast. That friend repeated the story to a local reporter. And before noon, nearly everyone in town had heard that something extraordinary had been found inside the old judge's desk. Most people assumed it was nothing more than an old survey or a forgotten property record. They joked about buried treasure and lost fortunes, never imagining that the map would awaken fears buried much deeper than gold. The first sign that the discovery meant something far more dangerous came just after lunch. Two sharply dressed men arrived at the courthouse without appointments. They carried no identification beyond expensive business cards bearing the name of the county's oldest and wealthiest family. Their smiles never reached their eyes as they politely asked to examine the map, insisting it was probably a harmless document connected to their ancestors, and should remain a private family matter. When the restoration supervisor explained that every historical artifact had to be documented before anyone could remove it, the men's expressions hardened. They quietly offered a sum of money so large that everyone in the room fell silent. The offer was refused. Less than an hour later, someone broke into the temporary archive room, where the parchment had been secured. Nothing else was disturbed. Shelves filled with valuable records remained untouched, antique furniture was left exactly where it stood, and expensive restoration equipment disappeared nowhere. The intruder had searched for only one thing. Fortunately, the map had already been transferred to a secure location for photography, leaving the thief with nothing but an empty storage box and scattered papers across the floor. Whoever entered the courthouse knew exactly what they were looking for, and exactly where they expected to find it. By evening, the pressure intensified. County officials began receiving anonymous phone calls warning them to stop the restoration immediately. Archivists reported unfamiliar vehicles parked outside their homes long after midnight. One elderly historian discovered that decades of research notes concerning the county's founding families had vanished from his office without any signs of forced entry. Even local newspaper editors received legal threats demanding that they avoid publishing anything related to the hidden compartment. Every attempt to suppress the discovery pointed toward the same influential bloodline whose wealth had shaped the county for generations. What disturbed investigators most was not the intimidations itself but the panic behind it. Families accustomed to power rarely reacted with such desperation unless they believed exposure was inevitable. The hidden map had not yet been deciphered, yet influential descendants were already spending enormous sums of money, calling in political favors, and risking public suspicion simply to prevent anyone from studying a piece of parchment whose true meaning remained unknown, making it painfully clear that whatever the map revealed had been protected for generations by people willing to do absolutely anything to keep it buried. The experts assigned to examine the parchment quickly realized it was unlike any official county survey preserved in the archives. The landmarks sketched across its surface did not match modern roads or property lines, but when compared with maps dating back more than a century, a pattern slowly began to emerge. Several creeks had changed course over the years, forests had been cleared, and entire settlements had disappeared. Yet enough natural features remained to identify the general area marked by the faded ink. At the center of the drawing was a symbol unlike anything recorded in courthouse documents, a small circle surrounded by 7 hand-drawn stones. Beside it, a series of measurements pointed toward a forgotten hillside several miles outside town, land that had belonged to the county's most powerful family since the late 19th century. A small team of investigators, accompanied by archaeologists and county officials, obtained permission to survey the property. The current owners insisted there was nothing of historical value there and argued that the map was probably meaningless, but they could not prevent the search without attracting even greater suspicion. After hiking through dense woods and overgrown brush, the team reached a shallow rise almost completely hidden beneath tangled vines and towering oak trees. At first glance, the location appeared untouched by human hands. Moss-covered rocks covered the slope, and thick roots twisted through the earth as though nature had erased every trace of the past. Yet the measurements on the parchment aligned perfectly with the landscape, leading the investigators to a narrow patch of ground, where the soil felt strangely loose beneath their boots. Excavation began cautiously. Within the first hour, workers uncovered fragments of weathered timber arranged in straight lines that could not have formed naturally. Beneath them lay rusted iron hardware, broken lantern glass, and the remains of an old wooden structure that had been deliberately buried rather than abandoned. As more soil was removed, additional discoveries emerged: charred beams, shattered household items, and dozens of corroded metal lockboxes crushed beneath collapsed supports. Inside those boxes were bundles of water-damaged documents wrapped in decaying leather. Although many pages had become unreadable, enough survived to expose property deeds bearing forged signatures, court orders authorizing unlawful land seizures, and handwritten financial records detailing payments made to judges, sheriffs, and county officials in exchange for favorable rulings. Every document pointed toward a carefully organized conspiracy that had transferred enormous amounts of land from struggling settlers into the hands of a single influential family. The excavation grew darker before sunset. Near the edge of the buried structure, investigators uncovered several unmarked graves hidden beneath layers of stone and compacted earth. Personal belongings recovered alongside the remains matched the names appearing in missing persons reports that had baffled local historians for generations. Medical examiners concluded the victims had not died of natural causes, while old newspaper clippings found among the documents suggested each disappearance had conveniently benefited the same powerful household. Piece by piece, the hidden map transformed from a mysterious artifact into undeniable evidence that the county's celebrated legacy had been built upon fraud, violence, intimidation, and carefully concealed murder, exposing a history so horrifying that generations of official records had been manipulated to ensure no one would ever uncover the truth beneath that forgotten hillside. News of the excavation spread far beyond the county within days. drawing historians, journalists, and state investigators eager to examine the extraordinary discovery. Television crews gathered outside the old courthouse while satellite trucks lined the streets, broadcasting live reports about the hidden map and the evidence emerging from beneath the forgotten hillside. Public interest intensified with every new document recovered, but as the investigation gained momentum, a series of unsettling events began to shadow everyone connected to the case. At first they seemed like unfortunate coincidences, equipment failures, delayed shipments, and unexplained power outages, but the pattern soon became impossible to ignore. The first incident occurred just before dawn when an excavation bulldozer, parked securely on level ground with its engine turned off, somehow rolled downhill and crashed through the protective fencing surrounding the dig site. Mechanics inspected the machine and found no mechanical defect capable of explaining how several heat safety systems had failed simultaneously. 2 nights later, every digital photograph taken during the previous week's excavation vanished from multiple storage devices. Backup drives that had been locked inside separate buildings were discovered, completely corrupted, while printed photographs left untouched remained the only surviving record of several crucial discoveries. Technicians blamed software errors, yet none could explain why only files connected to the buried structure had disappeared. Soon the disturbances became deeply personal. Members of the excavation team reported hearing footsteps circling their homes long after midnight, only to find empty streets whenever they looked outside. One archaeologist awoke to discover muddy boot prints leading from his front porch to his bedroom window, stopping just inches beneath the glass before vanishing without returning to the road. Another investigator received anonymous envelopes containing century-old newspaper clippings about unsolved disappearances, each article marked with a single handwritten sentence. Some graves should never be opened. None of the letters carried fingerprints or return addresses, and security cameras near the victims' homes captured nothing except moments of unexplained static before and after each delivery. Fear slowly replaced excitement among the investigation team. Experienced officers who had worked violent crime scenes admitted they had never encountered anything quite like the growing atmospheres surrounding the case. Several witnesses described seeing unfamiliar figures standing at the edge of the excavation after sunset. Whenever security personnel approached, the strangers disappeared into the surrounding woods without leaving footprints or broken branches behind. Others claimed distant lantern lights drifted through the trees on moonless nights, moving in perfect silence before fading into darkness. Whether these sightings were caused by frightened imaginations or deliberate attempts to intimidate the investigators remained impossible to determine. The tension reached its peak when the lead historian driving back from the state archives narrowly survived a catastrophic accident after his vehicle's brakes failed on a winding mountain road. Inspectors later concluded that the brake lines had been deliberately cut only hours before he left the parking lot. Hidden inside his briefcase, untouched by the crash, was a newly translated section of the map containing symbols that appeared to identify one final location, a place investigators had not yet searched and one that someone seemed willing to kill to keep. Forever hidden, the newly translated markings on the hidden map led investigators to a secluded stone chapel deep within the family's oldest estate, a building long believed to be nothing more than an abandoned place of worship. Hidden beneath its cracked foundation was a narrow staircase descending into a brick-lined chamber that had escaped every previous inspection. The air below was cold and stale, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying paper. Iron shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, holding dozens of leather-bound ledgers, sealed document boxes, and journals carefully arranged as though someone had expected them to remain untouched forever. Unlike the records found beneath the hillside, these documents had been preserved in remarkably good condition. Every page told the same horrifying story from a different perspective, confirming that the county's most respected family had built its fortune through systematic fraud, bribery, intimidation, and calculated violence stretching back more than a century. The ledgers documented payments made to judges, sheriffs, newspaper editors, bankers, and politicians, each transaction designed to manipulate court decisions and erase inconvenient truths from public record. Handwritten journals described secret meetings where innocent families were forced from their land through fabricated legal claims before armed men destroyed their homes to eliminate any evidence of ownership. Witnesses who refused to cooperate simply disappeared, their names quietly removed from official records as though they had never existed. One journal contained detailed accounts of murders disguised as accidents, while another listed children sent away under false identities after their parents vanished. The family's influence had reached into nearly every institution responsible for delivering justice, allowing generations of crimes to remain hidden beneath a carefully polished reputation. The final document uncovered in the underground chamber was a sealed confession written by the last judge to occupy the courthouse before his sudden retirement decades earlier. In trembling handwriting, he admitted that he had spent years delivering verdicts he knew were unjust because refusing the family meant condemning his own wife and children. Overwhelmed by guilt, he secretly created the map, dividing the evidence between multiple hidden locations so that no single fire, theft or corrupt official could destroy the complete truth. He concealed the first clue inside his own desk, believing that one day an honest person restoring the courthouse might discover it and finish what he no longer had the courage to do. His final words were neither an apology nor a plea for forgiveness but a warning that evil protected by power always believes itself untouchable until ordinary people refuse to look away. As every document was authenticated and released to the public, the family's ire unraveled with astonishing speed. Historic honors were revoked, properties were seized, monuments were removed, and generations of carefully protected prestige collapsed beneath overwhelming evidence that could no longer be denied. Descendants who had inherited unimaginable wealth suddenly found themselves answering for crimes committed long before they were born, while the county was forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that its proud history had been built upon deception, stolen lives, and blood-soaked silence, all brought crashing down by a single forgotten map hidden inside an old judge's desk.